Hi guys, it's Just McManus Fiction and welcome back to my channel. So if you're familiar with my channel, you might have noticed that I did a massive unhaul just because I need to get rid of some books before I move. However, while doing the unhaul, I realized that I've actually purchased a lot of books over the last few months and I figured I'd show them to you guys. So stick around to hear my summer book haul. Alright guys, so I have about 25 or so books on this list. There are a ton. Most of them are fantasy romance, then we have some YA fantasy, a decent amount of thrillers because I just did Summerween and apparently I went a little overboard with buying thrillers, and then some contemporaries and a few historical fictions. So I hope you guys enjoyed this list. Also, if you're unfamiliar with my channel, I post new videos every Thursday and Sunday. And if you haven't yet, you can like and subscribe. You can also hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I post new bookish content. You can also check out my Instagram. It is linked down in the description below. I've actually done pretty good. I was very proud of myself. I posted every day for Summerween, so I'm getting better at social media, guys. But with that being said, let's get into this list. All right, I'm going to start off with YA fantasy and then go from there. As always, I link timestamps down in the description, so if you just want to see a certain type of book, you can always check that out. Also, just to give you guys some idea, I'm only going to be giving a very brief summary of each book. A lot of these books will be featured in my July wrap-up, so I don't want to go too in-depth, and some of these books I haven't even gotten around to reading yet. So with that being said, let's start. The first book, okay, there's actually a story to go along with this first book. So this first book I swore I owned. I read it, and I must have just read it on Kindle, and I swore I had a hard copy, but apparently not, and that is Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin. So I'm actually not a huge fan of this book. I really enjoyed Serpent and Dove, which is the prequel to this, or not the prequel, but the first book in this series. It follows Lou, who is a witch, and she ends up being married to Reid, Diggory, who's a witch hunter, and there's just a bunch of shenanigans, and there's really good side characters, and I really enjoyed the first book. Blood and Honey, not so much. However, the third book, God and Monsters, is going to be released very soon, and I'm going to do a recap video where I recap what happens in the first and second book in preparation for God and Monsters. So I figured I would get this. It was on sale at my used bookstore. I figured it was perfect. So book number one. All right, the first two books on this list are actually sequels to other YA fantasy series that I read last year, and I really enjoyed. So the first one is Vicious Spirits by Kat Cho. This is the sequel to Wicked Fox, which I loved. I thought it was so fun. It reads very much as like a K-pop drama, or not K-pop, but like a Korean drama, but it was great. So it follows Mi-young, who is a, oh my gosh, I forget the word, Ginho? I'll have it on the screen somewhere. But a nine-tailed fox, and they suck out the souls of men, which is like a really cool concept. And then she meets Ji-hoon, who is just a normal boy being raised by his grandmother. They develop this relationship, but Mi-young's mom is super against this because she's supposed to be sucking out men's souls. So it goes from there. There's just so much fun drama. It feels like a soap opera, and it's great, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm very much looking forward to reading this. Next up, we have All the Tides and Fate, and this is by Adalyn Grace, and this is the sequel to All the Stars and Teeth, which I also read last year. I think this is a perfect summer series. This is also, I believe, a duology, so this is the last book, but it follows Amora, who is in charge of soul magic for her island, or she's learning to become in charge of soul magic, which is one of the deadliest and most revered magics of all of the islands. So in Amora's world, all of the islands have different sorts of powers. Very much like the Divergent, the different cities, it's pretty much that, but think islands. And she's been training her whole life to be in charge of soul magic. Unfortunately, her training kind of goes awry when she is supposed to showcase her power, and she has to flee, and when she flees, she meets Bastion, who is in charge of this really cool pirate ship. So that's the premise of the first book. I have no idea what happens in the second one. I don't want to give away spoilers, but I'm assuming it picks up right where the last one left off because it leaves off on a little bit of a cliffhanger, and you find out a lot at the ending of the first book. So I'm super pumped to be picking this up. I've been waiting for the summer to read this just because the magic pirate ship, all of the stories on the sea, the setting is so good and so immersive. Like, you feel like you're there. So this is a perfect summer read. And the next 2 books on this list are both Fairy Loot edition books, and I've already talked about them many times on my channel, so I'm going to keep this very brief. But the first one is The Prison Healer by Lynette and Noni. This is probably going to be one of my top YA fantasy reads of 2021. No other YA fantasy I've read so far has come close. It's so good. It follows Kiva, who is the prison healer of a jail known as Zalandov, and she has just been biding her time, living her life here, waiting for her family to save her. And her family's just been writing her notes being like, stay patient, we're coming to get you. But it's been 10 years, and she's kind of giving up hope. However, one day, the Rebel Queen is sent to Zalandov, and there is a note inside the Rebel Queen's pocket that says, keep her alive, we're coming to get you. And it's from Kiva's family. So Kiva has to figure out what to do. She decides to take the place of the Rebel Queen. Unfortunately, the Rebel Queen has just been sentenced to these elemental trials that no one has ever survived. So Kiva is going to have to beat these trials and wait for her family to come save her. I loved this book. The ending of this book was chef's kiss. It was so good. I was shook. It was great. So definitely check this one out if you're a fan of YA fantasy. And the last YA fantasy book is Witches Steeped in Gold by Ciannon Smart. This has been on my TBR for 2 months now. I'm finally getting to it. I've really enjoyed it. It is a Jamaican-inspired fantasy that follows 2 witches that are typically against each other, but they have to team up in order to take down someone. I haven't really gotten to figure out who the big bad is yet, but we're getting there. I love the writing in this so far. It is great. I believe this is a debut novel, which is really impressive because it's really good so far. So I will definitely be doing a full review, or at least I'll be explaining this in my July wrap-up. So look forward to that. All right, so next up I'm going to be talking about some new adult books and some fantasy romance books. These books are a little bit more mature. They normally have a little bit more sexual content, but I'm super excited about most of these. The first one is For the Wolf by Hannah Whitten. So far, I'm loving this. It is like Beauty and the Beast meets Little Red Riding Hood, and it's been great. The atmosphere in this story is just described beautifully. I love a dark wood setting. I kind of wish I waited until like the fall to read this because it kind of gives me those vibes. However, I think this is going to be one of my favorite books of the year. So it pretty much follows Red. I forget what her full name is. She has another name, Ravina maybe, but she is the second daughter. So the first daughter is for the throne. The second daughter is for the wolf. So I don't think it's every few years. I think it's every like 50 years or so. The second daughter of the queen gives her child to the wood, and then she is sacrificed to the wolf in order to get these kings back. I don't really know anything past that because I'm not even halfway through this book. However, like I said, I'm loving this. I think we're going to definitely get the whole Beauty and the Beast vibe. We just met the wolf. The wolf is not what she was expecting. I love it. So I'm so excited about this book. This is like my number 1 on this list. I think it's going to be a 5-star read. I'm almost positive it's going to be a 5-star read. Next up is a book I read a while ago, but I ended up buying a physical copy because I originally just had it on my Kindle, and that is Disenchanted, and this is by Brianna Sugalski, and this follows Lilac, who is the princess of this kingdom who is able to hear darklings or communicate with darklings, and in this book darklings are mythical and paranormal creatures. So no one else has this power, and it's very much feared. She was cursed actually as a child, and she thinks she's able to find a way to break this curse, but she has to travel through the dark wood, and in doing so she ends up meeting a vampire, and they kind of team up, and it was a very fun time. I will say my only issue with this book is there are a decent amount of spelling and grammatical errors, which doesn't normally bug me at all, but for some reason in this book it did a little bit. But I still very much enjoyed this book, obviously enough to buy a physical copy of it. So I highly recommend if you like ACOTAR and those type of books. If you like From Blood and Ash, you'll probably really enjoy this. And next up, we have an entire book series, or I think I'm missing 2 out of the series, but I read the first one in the series and I was just hooked. I loved it so much. And it's not at all a type of book I would normally pick up. And that is the Wicked Villain series by Katee Roberts. So this is essentially Disney villain smut, and it's amazing. I read Katee Roberts, or I was introduced to Katee Roberts with Neon Gods when I was doing a Hades and Persephone discussion, and I really enjoyed Neon Gods. I thought it was done very, very well. So I wanted to see what other books she had, and she ended up having the Wicked Villain series, which is pretty much all the different villains if they ended up with the princesses. So the first one, the only one I've read so far, I haven't read the rest, is Desperate Measures, and this follows Jafar and Jasmine with Aladdin being the bad guy, and it's great. So I ended up picking up the other two. I'm not going to go too in-depth with this because, like I said, I will be talking about this in my July wrap-up, but I really liked it. And I think that if you're a fan of Disney and you kind of want a different take, these books are awesome. All right, the next book I actually talked about in my July TBR, and TikTok made me buy it. So I just downloaded TikTok. I ended up on Book Talk, and this book sounded very interesting. A lot of people compared it to like new adult spicy Harry Potter, which I was intrigued. So the Zodiac Academy by Carol Peckham and Susanne Valenti. So this follows two twin girls who end up finding out that they are fae and actually have these special powers. And when they go to the academy, the powers are kind of based on like your zodiac sign. So you have like air signs, water signs, fire signs. And these girls are super gifted. However, they had no idea they were these fae beings, so they don't really know how to use their powers yet. And it goes from there. I think this is going to be a very good time. I believe there are multiple books in this series, so we'll see how I feel about this one. So far, I'm like lukewarm on how I feel about it, but I think it's going to get better, so we will see. And next up is another book that I actually had on my Kindle but wanted a physical copy. And I haven't finished this book either, so I'm going to give a very brief synopsis. But this is Seeds by M.M Kin. Yes. And it's a Hades and Persephone retelling. I love Hades and Persephone retellings. After I did my Hades and Persephone recommendation video, I found out about so many more. And if you guys know any good retellings, please leave them in the comments down below. I'm always looking for a good Hades and Persephone story. So I will definitely be getting into this, but it seems really interesting, and the few pages I've read, I've really enjoyed. All right, the next book on this list, I wasn't really sure how to classify, so it's going to get its own little timestamp, but that is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I love this. I love anything by this author. She also wrote The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and my absolute favorite, Daisy Jones and the Six. This follows the Riva children, who are the children of Mick Riva, who is this very famous musician, and now they live in Malibu, and they're all surfers, and they're pretty famous, and every year they host this huge end of the summer party, and this book pretty much follows the entire day of that party, so we're kind of jumping different timelines and different perspectives, but it's amazing. I love the Riva children, all of them. I want more books on their life because I did not get enough from this book. But this is a very fast read. I think it's a very good beach read, and I really enjoyed it. And I will pretty much pick up any book from this author going forward. She has proved herself. I think she's amazing. All right, so now we're gonna move on to YA thrillers. I'm gonna start with the two that I read and then move on to the ones that I haven't read yet. So the first one is Truly Devious, and this is by Maureen Johnson. This follows, okay, let me start at the beginning. This is about a school that was created by this man named, I think, Ellington, and he only wants very gifted students to go there. And it's a school that has a lot of notoriety until one day the founder's wife and daughter are kidnapped and murdered. And there's a note left that says, by Truly Devious. So then we fast forward in time, and now we're following Stevie. And Stevie is a girl that is just obsessed with cold cases and murder and trying to solve them. So she wants to go to this academy to figure out what happened to the founder's family, who killed them, who is truly devious. I did enjoy this. There is another murder that takes place while Stevie is at the school that she also has to solve. I don't think this is a super standout book to me. I enjoyed it while I was reading it, and then I kind of forgot it. I actually had to go on Goodreads to remind myself what I thought about this book. I do have the sequel that I just keep putting off, which I am going to try to read over the summer. I think as the series progresses, it is supposed to get a lot better. It was all right. So definitely worth checking out if you want like a very mild thriller. Like there's some scary elements, but like nothing too bad. All right, next up is a thriller that I was obsessed with. I couldn't recommend this one more. I really enjoyed it, and that is Ace of Spades by Faridah Àbíké-Íyímídé. And this is a YA thriller that was pitched as Gossip Girl meets Get Out, and I think that is the perfect pitch. I've talked about this numerous times on my channel as well, but it follows Chiamaka and Vaughn, and they are both the only black students at this very prestigious white school, and Chiamaka is kind of like the queen bee. She is getting ready to go to Yale and is just having a very good time at school, while Vaughn is kind of flying under the radar and is trying just to get through his classes. And then one day they start receiving texts in their senior year, and these texts are slowly starting to ruin their lives. These texts are going out to all of the student body, and it just gets worse and worse. The bullying is ridiculous, and then mysterious things start happening and suspicious things, and it just gets very, very bizarre very quickly. I love the pacing in this book. It never really lets up. This book was just awesome. So highly recommend. I really enjoyed it, and I'm very happy to have a physical copy. All right, the next two YA thrillers are books I haven't actually read yet. So the first one is The One, and this is by John Mars. And this is about people that are able to match, or I'm sorry, a company creates a way for you to pretty much find your soulmate via DNA. And I think we're following different perspectives. A serial killer, I think like a wife. I'm not really positive, but it sounded really cool. I know it's being made into a Netflix show, which I'm excited about. But I just find that premise very interesting. Like, if you're married to someone and then you find out that your soulmate is actually someone else, like, how would that affect your life? What if you find out your soulmate, you get married to them, and then, like, you guys hate each other? I don't know. I found it really interesting, so I'm very excited to be reading this one. And the last YA thriller on this list is a book that is getting a lot of hype on BookTube, so I was very curious, and that is The Cousins by Karen McManus. This follows a group of cousins that do not know each other very well, but they end up being invited to the residence of their grandmother, and their parents all say, you guys gotta go, your grandma's rich, and I think murder might ensue. I'm not sure what happens from there, but it sounded like a really cool premise. It reminded me a little bit of Knives Out, like a tiny bit, with the whole inheritance thing. I don't know, it should be a good time. I'm very excited, and I also think this will be like a very quick, nice beach read. So once again, like I keep saying, I'm very excited to be reading this in the future. All right, all the last books on this list are adult thrillers and adult horrors. So I think I said this earlier, but I participated in Summerween, the readathon that's hosted by Olivia Reid and Gabby Reeds, and I developed a new love of thriller and horror books. I read some really good ones. You can check out my vlog. I will leave it linked in the description and in the cards just so you can kind of see the books I read. But there's some really good ones on here, so I'm excited to talk about them with you guys. All right, the first two books on here I purchased, but I don't actually have physically. One, because it's the book of the month book and it's in my mailbox and I haven't gotten around to getting it. And the other one is because my friend loves Taylor Adams just as much as I do. And as soon as I finished the book, I dropped it off at her house so she can read it. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Survive the Night by Riley Sager. This is by Riley Sager, so it's amazing. It follows a girl who It follows a girl whose friend was just murdered, and she's just super depressed, and she also has lost her family. And when she lost her family in a car accident, she started playing movies in her head. She became very obsessed with movies, but it's starting to alter her reality a little bit to the point where she'll see something, if she becomes very stressed out, she'll just see it as a movie, more theatrical. So you can't really trust her. She's not the most reliable narrator for this book. However, like, you really do root for her. And after her friend is murdered in college, she ends up wanting to go home, and she doesn't drive because her parents were killed in a car accident. So she ends up putting on a message board that she is looking for a ride. I think it's from New Jersey to Ohio. I might be wrong, but a very long stretch of drive. And she ends up meeting this stranger who offers to drive her. And once in the car, she starts to believe that there might be more to this stranger than she originally thinks. And you're not really sure if it's movies in her mind that are making her think that this stranger could be a killer, or if it's actually happening, if this guy's actually suspicious. And it really goes from there. I did very much enjoy this book. I'll go more in depth in my July wrap up, but overall, it was a good time. Is it my favorite Riley Sager book? No, unfortunately. But that is actually going to be in that vlog I read the last time I lied. Oh my gosh, that book's amazing. But anyway, Survive the Night, very good. I would definitely recommend checking it out. The next thriller I read was Hairpin Bridge, and this is by Taylor Adams, who also wrote No Exit. I did very much enjoy this book as well. It follows two twin sisters, Cambry and Lena. Cambry is more of the outgoing, a little bit crazy twin, while Lena is a little bit more reserved. And one day, Cambry is driving. I'm sorry, both sisters are estranged, so they haven't seen each other in a while, probably because they're different personalities. And one day, Cambry is off driving. She's living in her car, and she stumbles upon something that she shouldn't have seen. And the next day, her body is found at the end of Hairpin Bridge. So trigger warning for self-harm, suicide, death of a loved one, I believe also. But Lena starts to believe that first of all, Lena doesn't believe her sister would ever commit suicide, so she drives to Hairpin Bridge in order to figure out what really happened. And there she meets a detective, and they pretty much try to get to the bottom of what happened to her sister. Was it a suicide? Was it a murder? If it was a murder, who was involved? If it was a suicide, who was involved? And it goes from there. The ending of this book is insanity. So I will say, I said I wasn't going to go in depth with these, but I'm going to go a little bit in depth. The first 3/4 of the book, I was a little bit bored. It took a little while for me to actually care and like get into it. But that last fourth of the book was insane. It was so good and so intense and just out of nowhere. So overall, very much enjoyed it. Definitely recommend. Next up is another thriller that I really enjoyed, and that is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. And this was very popular. I think it just came out a couple months ago. I got it as my book of the month book, and I loved it. This is also the author of The Silent Patient. Funny enough, I didn't love The Silent Patient, but I really enjoyed this. And I feel like this isn't getting as good reviews as The Silent Patient, so maybe you'll like one, you'll like the other. I don't know. But it follows a woman who has recently lost her husband, and she is a group therapist, so she likes to have, or she doesn't like, she has people at her house where she performs group therapy, and it's a lot about like the group dynamic. And one day, her niece Zoe ends up calling her, and someone has been murdered. Zoe's friend has been murdered at the College of Cambridge. So Zoe begs her aunt to come and help, and Zoe begins to suspect it is a professor who actually has almost a cult following to be responsible for her friend's murder. So it goes from there. There's a lot of twists and turns. I loved the setting and the not ambiance. I love the atmosphere of this book. I love the Cambridge setting. It was just very well done. I really enjoyed this. It felt very eerie. It's just a very immersive book, I feel like, and I enjoyed it very much. So if you want a nice thriller, also in the beginning of this book, there's talking about Greece and on vacation, so it also kind of works as like a beachy read. I would check this one out. Once again, I really enjoyed it. I think it's getting mixed reviews, but if you know my taste and you like the books I like, I think you will enjoy this book. Next up is a horror book that I loved so much. It is so fun, and if you can, I suggest getting the audio version and the book. I know that's kind of pricey, but I think it's definitely worth it for this book, and that is Horrorstör by Grady Hendrix. So this is pretty much set in IKEA. It's called Borsk, but it's essentially IKEA, and this woman has been working in IKEA for a very long time. She's not really going anywhere with her life, and she's just very bored, and it's just the mundane day-to-day. And one day she gets into work, and there is just this foul-smelling stuff all over one of the couches. So her hiring manager decides to ask her to stay the night in order to figure out what's actually going on. Is someone sneaking into this store and vandalizing it? Like, what's happening? So they end up spending the night, and shit hits the fan, and it goes crazy. They end up doing a seance, a bunch of other crazy shit happens, and it's just, the writing in this, I just said I wasn't going to get into these books. I'm totally getting into these books. But the writing in this is just disgusting and graphic, but also really cool, if that makes any sense. It's done very well, and there's just like the imagery in this is going to be like burned into my brain. Like, there's certain scenes in this that were absolutely disgusting and horrible that I can't ever unsee, but also it was a really good time, and I really loved finding out like what was going to happen. I really enjoyed this book. But I said to get the audio version just because it literally is like an IKEA catalog. So maybe I'll like show you guys on the bottom like what it looks like inside. But there's like descriptions of all the different furniture, and the audio version does a very good job of like having a different narrator come in and like describe the descriptions of furniture, and it's just, there's extra sound effects. And I think the audio version is really good, but there's also really good visuals in this book. Anyway, I have a new love of Grady Hendrix, and I will be reading more books from them, which goes with the next book on this list. The next book on this list has actually been on BookTube for a while, and I never thought about picking it up because I'm not a huge horror fan. However, because of Horrorstör, I'm obsessed with Grady Hendrix, and I decided to pick up the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I just know this is about, it follows the life of a woman who lives in the South, and I think a vampire ends up moving to town. and I think it's going to be awesome. I just think Grady Hendrix's writing is just so clever and well done, and I love his, like I said, I love his imagery and everything. So I think this will be a really fun time. Unfortunately, I have a lot of other books ahead of this on my TBR, but I definitely want to try to get to this in August just because I think it does have like some summer vibes. Because it's set in the South, I think it'll be a really good read. Alright guys, we are down to the final 4 books. So the next one is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I've decided I'm going to try to read all of Riley Sager's backlist just because all 3 Riley Sager books I've read so far, I've really enjoyed. I think that the twists are just great and they keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time. So this one follows I don't know very much about it, but it follows a girl who is really down on her luck. She is completely broke and she finds out that someone is looking for a person to live in their Manhattan apartment and they can get paid a ton of money just by doing that, but they're not allowed to talk to the neighbors. So I believe this girl ends up moving into this apartment and then weird stuff starts happening. I think a neighbor disappears and it goes from there. I think it'll be really good. Once again, Riley Sager, I just feel like is one of those authors that I also, if they write a book, I'm probably gonna really enjoy it. So I can't wait to get to this one. Next up is a book I bought solely because I thought the cover was gorgeous, and that is House of Hollow, and that's by Crystal Sutherland. So all I know about this is it is a thriller. It is pretty short, so I think I can get through it pretty quickly. But look at that cover. I just think it's so, so pretty. But it follows, I believe, 3 sisters, and when they were younger, they all went missing, and when they came back, they all had different characteristics. I think their eye color changed, their hair color changed, and they've just been living their life, but everyone kind of keeps a wide berth from them. And then one day, after I think 10 years, one of the other sisters ends up going missing again, and the other 2 sisters end up trying to find her. I believe. I could be completely wrong, but that's what I got without just rereading the synopsis to you guys. But it sounds really good, and I'm very excited to pick this one up. Alright, the next book I actually purchased on a book shopping vlog that I will leave in the cards and in the description, and that is The Last Thing He Told Me, and this is by Laura Dave. So this follows a woman whose husband has just vanished, but before he vanished, he left a note that said protect her. And she's assuming he's talking about his daughter, her stepdaughter, Haley. I believe her name is Haley. And together, Haley and the main character have to figure out what happened to her husband. That's all I know. This sounds really good. It's been getting really good reviews. I'm very excited to pick it up. And it also has like a beach vibe, if you can kind of see. So I actually picked it up purposely to read during the summer, so I actually have to get to this pretty quick. I'm running out of summertime. And the last book is another horror book, and it's one that I wanted to read for Summerween, but I figured I would stick to shorter books so I could read as much as possible. This one's a little bit longer, but it's perfect for like summer horror. And that is Into the Drowning Deep by Maria Grant. And this is about killer mermaids. I mean, that's perfect for summer. I'm very excited to read this. I really don't know anything else about it. I just know that I think Murphy Napier read this and liked it, and there was another booktuber that really enjoyed this. And the premise, killer mermaids, just sounds so cool to me, so I'm very excited to read this. Alright guys, that is it for my book haul. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have read any of these books, please let me know down in the comments below. Even if I haven't read them yet, I want to know your opinions. I want to know what you guys think. Also, I post new videos on Thursday and Sunday, and if you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. I will see you all next week. Bye.